Hello and welcome to Season 2, episode number 9 of Marketing Nuggets with Gabriella Ferenczi. That's my name. And I'm a German and Hungarian language teacher, language coach. I live in London in the UK, and I run a language training company that's called ProLingua Global. And I specialize in working with corporate leaders in the financial services industry. Now, in January 2021, I started a passion project that I like to call Thrive Online. And it's basically a place where I share the nitty-gritty of practical modern online marketing with fellow language professionals. And this show is also part of that. Now, in this particular marketing nugget, I'm talking to linguist and communications consultant, Eloise Leeson. So I met Eloise multiple times at Language Professionals Networking event, where she was both a speaker as well as a panelist. And she has this very interesting point of view of approaching marketing from a linguistic point of view, which I think is a very fresh take on marketing and communication. And I think this is something that really resonates with us, language professionals as well, for obvious reasons. We are all linguists after all. And by accident, although, when I say accident, I don't believe in accidents, but by accident, I came across this American podcast channel where Eloise was interviewed by a sales mentor. And she talked about some of her ideas on linguistics and marketing. And the audience of that podcast channel were non-linguists. And I was like, wow, I really have to invite her to Marketing Nuggets and dig a little bit deeper on the linguistic side of the story. And now here she is, Eloise. Hello, welcome. And thank you so much for accepting my invitation to be interviewed on the Marketing Nuggets podcast.
It is such a pleasure to be here, Gabriella. Thank you so much for having me. And as you say quite rightly, it's such a passion, I think, that we both share about bringing the very best of ourselves and of language to marketing, and how can we thrive in that space, and most importantly, help other people to thrive as well.
On that note, let's start with explaining a bit about your backstory. So how did you end up being a linguist and a marketer?
Oh, that's so. So I like to say that I was seduced by linguistics, because I went to university, as so many of us do when we're young and a bit thick, and we go, I'm going to do what I was good at school. Now, there's nothing wrong with that at all. I think it's a very wonderful thing to continue to pursue those passions. But I went to university to do French and history because that's what you did. And when I was there, I found a filler course about linguistics and phonetics and phonology. Don't at me, but phonetics and phonology, which typically most people hate. And I just thought, oh, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And I hadn't even got to the sociolinguistics or to, the syntax and semantics and morphology aspect of language. And it really astonished me that I could study something that I'd always been fascinated by. And I think growing up, I'd always had a curiosity about accents and about very immature understanding of what language was. So I went to do French and history at the University of Aberdeen and emerged with a single honours in linguistics, as you do. And along the way, I really found a huge interest and passion for language and identity, and language and critical discourse analysis, and really the idea of reading between the lines and interrogating the language that we use on a daily basis. And one of the most incredible pieces of advice, or really the kind of perspectives I was given during my degree, was by Professor Barbara Fennell, who is now retired, but absolutely brilliant academic. And Professor Fennell said, linguistics really is about making your language toolkit conscious. In every single human being, without exception, there is a subconscious language toolkit that we all possess. Linguistics really is the art of making that toolkit conscious. What are the things that we do on a daily basis that we don't even realize that we do, that can either create one kind of effect, make someone feel very welcome, or conversely push someone further away? And that's obviously my interest, is looking at it through a human lens and a human relationship lens. But that ultimately is what marketing to me is all about, is about forging better human relationships. And the same with business. Business is a human to human interaction. It sometimes will result in a transaction, but ultimately it should be about putting people back at the heart of what business is all about. And if linguistics and language is a tool for us to do that for good, why wouldn't you wield it ultimately?
Amen. Amen to that. And listen, so how did you end up in marketing and ultimately establishing your company, Olim?
So I got into marketing, and I do sort of marketing and communications in a variety of different bits and pieces under the banner of Olim. But after my degree, I wound up teaching at the university for a couple of years. And then I did a quick 90-degree career turn and was part of the team that helped launch Deliveroo into Scotland. So that was a very, shall we say, a crash course in startup culture and learning all about, what it was to be part of a business that was growing so rapidly. And then I sort of did another little career detour a little while afterwards and discovered that I'm horrible at advertising sales. I can't ask for money over the phone, which closes down lots of potential salubrious career opportunities. And then I was headhunted to join a really fantastic brand agency called Lux. And Lux was a food and drink specific agency that I'd come across whilst I was working at Deliveroo. So really that kind of food and drink hospitality industry background, and had the pleasure and the privilege of working for Lux for just over two and a half years, I think it was. And then I was offered a sabbatical in Canada, kind of landed in my lap. My former partner said, did I fancy going with him to Toronto? He was going to start a new chapter in his career. And I said, yeah, 6 months in Toronto, if I have to. I guess I can fall on that sword. And I thought to myself, well, if ever I was going to go freelance, this would be a really great place for me to start. And I started out trying to be a food and drink freelance journalist and failed miserably at that. So I then was working as I have been the board member of a charity called What Why Children in Hospital, and did a lot of work pro bono for them around their social media marketing and around sort of various awareness campaigns and things like that. And I cold emailed 55, 60 members of Scottish Parliament, because despite the accent, I am Scottish and do live in Scotland. And cold emailed them to say, hey, the charity that I'm doing this pro bono work for is phenomenal. And the charity makes videos that help children overcome anxiety before they have hospital procedures. So you're 6 years old and you've never seen an MRI happen before, but you have to lie still and things are going to move, and is it going to hurt? And I don't know. And the panic that it causes is completely natural and understandable. So the charity helps children feel more empowered by showing them exactly what's going to happen, by making real life videos of children who are going to have those procedures, to ask all those questions, show what it's going to be like in real life. And this has a fantastic knock-on effect on the first time effectiveness of procedures, so getting stuff done first time. It's fantastic for children who may have autism or be autistic, or have some kind of additional neurodivergent aspect to them that means that this is a really helpful medium for them to learn more. So rambling aside, I cold emailed these MSPs, and something like 15 of them came back to say, we'd love to pass a parliamentary motion for you recognizing this work. And I went, hold on. It's very rare that an MSP will respond to an email, not necessarily because of their own volition, but just they're busy people. So I thought there must have been something in the email. The parliamentary motion was passed, I think, in the span of a week, which to me was just earth-shattering, that it could have happened so quickly. And ultimately, what I realized reflecting on this was like, oh, I've pitched them. I've pitched these people, total stranger, out of the blue. There must have been something in that email, from a marketing perspective, if you will, that inspired some kind of action. So that really is where Olim was born. And Olim, as a consultancy, takes linguistics and not shoehorns it, but embeds it into marketing practices. And really a lot of that is just looking at putting people back at the heart of what it is that you're trying to say. And I promise I will stop talking eventually, but Olim as a name comes from the Latin meaning once, and it was often used in the sense of a story, so once upon a time. But my personal favorite is actually, it was used in the Roman Praetorium, where it would be used to say, we're about to say something really important, so you better shut up and listen. So really that's the spirit that I like to move into the business and the work that I do for my clients, is that we're going to say something really important. Make sure you perk your ears up.
Wow, what a story! I didn't know anything about Olim, but thank you so much for explaining the story. Well, ultimately how it was born, but actually it was also what the word meant. I didn't know that it was a Latin word. But what an interesting! I mean, what a testament to your way of crafting those words and sentences. The fact that that you managed to get your point across in a way. Help me out. What's your sentence? You help to get people get their point across in a way. It's how it's perceived help me out, because that's ultimately what actually happened here with the Scottish members of parliament here. You managed to get your point across in a way that really resonated with them, and they wanted to take immediate action, and in a week's time they passed the motion. What's your slogan? How do you put it? How do you phrase it?
So the slogan is closing the gap between what it is that you think you're saying and what's actually being received by your customers.
By our customers. And clearly, words are powerful. Words are powerful. And so in what way would you say, on that note, in what way would you say that words have this power to influence our sales and marketing efforts?
Well, I mean, they're everything, aren't they? You know, words are, sorry, I don't even know what that noise was. So we can, words are, end of story, words are, and they can be used for good or for ill. But I think we often, because we use them so much and we throw them away, we often don't realize how powerful they can be. And I think really that's the starting point for so much of my work, is realizing the impact that language actually has. And people talk about, you know, design and the substance of design, and we talk about the, you know, the brand DNA, and we talk about the values, and that's all wonderful. But unless you can put that into words and into language that resonates with the people you want to speak to, it's all completely wasted. And that is proven time again. You know, we will have an exquisitely designed landing page, no shade thrown at designers, by the way. I think you have one of the hardest jobs ever. But the design for certain web pages is fantastic, but if the copy isn't up to scratch, if the words aren't up to scratch, it doesn't matter how lovely it looks. There's a fantastic Scottish phrase, again, speaking of words, where if it's all style and no substance, we say it's all fur coat and no knickers. You know, it might look lovely on the outside, but actually what's underneath doesn't have a huge amount of integrity. And I think really for me, that's where it is that if you dismiss words, they will wind up dismissing you. And I think that's one of the kind of core fundamentals, is that the more you think about language, the better the results will be that you get. You know, the market gives us what we deserve. And if you're going to take the time to really craft language and messaging that resonates with your customers, first by finding out what those customers want in the first place. Like, can we have a moment for asking people what they want? I mean, it's funny when everyone does the whole like, oh yeah, well, we just have to figure out what the target market wants. And I go, yeah, did you ask them? They went, oh, we couldn't do that. Just come on. And I've ranted about that before. But it is, I think words are ultimately one of the most powerful things you can harness to your business. And if you're not, you're missing out on so much. And I just think that's one of the greatest shames around, honestly.
So resonating with the target audience, or finding a way to get through to them. So why is it important to make people feel that we really understand them through our words?
Well, think about any relationship that you have ever. The relationships that you have with your nearest and dearest and the people that you love and light you up, you have them around because they make you feel a certain way, don't you? You know, you think about you know, hopefully your family, if that's a wonderful relationship, or your chosen family, or your best friend, or that, you know, one work colleague that always makes you smile. It's, you don't necessarily remember the things that they say or the things that you do. And obviously I'm paraphrasing Maya Angelou here, but you do always remember how they make you feel. And the people that make you feel great are the people you want to come back to time and time again. And I don't understand why anyone would think that business is any different, really. And marketing to me is the, you know, the art of forging those relationships with total strangers, you know, by way of introduction, and not quite as a static object, but, you know, if a website can make you smile, if it can make you laugh, you know, for all the various chemical reasons you can look at, such as the release of oxytocin in the system, you know, or things like neurolinguistic programming, when you have this association of something good with, you know, a particular pattern interrupt. The reason that it's so important to use words that resonate is because that is your fast track to a positive relationship with your customer. And that ultimately, again, I think is what everybody's looking for, one way or another.
So using words that resonate, how can we use words that help us demonstrate that we really understand where our target market is coming from?
Absolutely. Point number one, do your research, go out and ask your customers what they're looking for. And then this is the real kicker is, and it really shouldn't be, but mirror that in your language. You know, I don't know if anyone's ever had the career or the CV advice of take the job description separate it into all the things that they want, and then add in where you meet all of those criteria. It is mirroring. Ultimately, it's taking what they've told you they want and saying, hey, look, here's the stuff you told me that you want. And I know that sounds really silly and it sounds really obvious, but you would be astonished at how few people actually do that. And one of the things that I think is, one of the fundamentals of linguistic mirroring and what makes it so powerful is that you can't make that happen unless you go through a process of really active listening. And active listening then becomes the bedrock of all of your interactions moving forward. So if you're, and this goes for sales, for marketing, for any kind of business activity, if you are genuinely listening to what people want, whether you're problem solving, whether you're in HR and you're solving some kind of dispute, or you're looking to recruit someone, if you're actively listening to what's going on, especially as a language professional, you will be able to pick up what's being said in between those lines, being able to take that, translate it, and then pass it back to them. And that's PARSE. So you're kind of processing internally and then presenting your conclusion, is a way of saying, here's what I've heard, is that correct? And that is the fundamental aspect really of empathy, but you're actually forging that empathy as you go. Now, not to say that you need to go out there to everybody on your website who visits you and say, hi, let's have an active listening, empathetic conversation. Not necessarily, but it's a much better way of finding out language than using things like personas, for example. Now, again, not throwing shade at personas, they can be helpful in certain circumstances. But if you take a white man in his early 70s living somewhere around the London area, you have Ozzy Osbourne and Prince Charles in the same category. Now, thanks to Louis Grenier for that one, because he does a really great job of disabusing us of the notion that we need personas. But by actively listening to what's going on, you will find similar triggers in your target market and in your target customer that you can then recreate in the copy on your website or in your sales language or in your calls, so that they feel like you're speaking their language. And in linguistics, there are things known as sociolects, and a sociolect is really a way of bonding through language. What do your family call the TV remote at home, Gabriella?
So what would we call it? Well, ultimately, they would probably use the Hungarian language to call it anything. Or let's say in my home, we just call it the remote, I guess.
Okay, fantastic. But there are some families out there who might call their remote something like the Frank or the Zapper, because of obviously the musician Frank Zappa. My family, we call it the squiggly box. And really what we're doing there is, and it's a very basic example, very unsophisticated example, but that there are certain words that we use with a specific group of people that we use as identifiers of that group. So a sociolect is really, if you think about a dialect being an offshoot of a larger language, then a sociolect is a smaller way of making sense socially through language. And that can be true of your family, of your spouse or your partner. It can be true of your, your best friend group. An inside joke is an example of a sociolect in action. And it won't make sense to people outside. So I've asked people to pass me the squiggly box before, not thinking that they would, not even thinking about it for a second. They're going, I'm sorry, what did you just ask me? So when it comes to that, what you're almost creating through your active listening and through your target market research is a kind of sociolect for your customers, where there will be words in there that make them feel safe, seen, and listened to. And that is one of the fundamentals of writing any kind of good copy, in my opinion.
And so basically you just touched upon what linguistic mirroring is in marketing. So using the exact words, phrases that our customers would use, so that when they land on our website or they read our post or our email, they feel at home. Is that the idea?
And you've just paraphrased it infinitely more elegantly than I think I could have done, Gabby. So yeah, absolutely. That's in a nutshell, in the 2 minutes it took you to say, not the 20 that I did. But no, you're exactly right. That's exactly it. Making someone feel seen and safe and at home and comfortable.
So on that notion, to continue this point, I think there is this, so the academic writing and using the language of our customers, right? So this is here where we are getting at. So you are saying that that we should use their language. However, it's so easy to fall into this trap, what you would call, of trying to come across as someone very clever, someone very intellectual in our copy, rather than trying to bond with that particular person. So we think that we are bonding through our clever words, but actually that might be the opposite of what we want to achieve. So what's your idea about this?
First of all, it's a fantastic question. And I think, in my experience, and this doesn't necessarily mean that because someone's done this, they're a bad person. Let's just put that down there as an initial caveat. The reason that I think we want to appear academic is because either we're terrified because we feel inferior, or we feel superior to other people and therefore have to show them how much better we are than them by using language that makes us seem clever, but in actual fact creates a greater distance between us and others. Both are really, really sad situations, because the last thing that you want to be, first of all, we all have this inherent, I think, sort of potential fear of being inferior to others, because we all hold ourselves to much higher standards, I think, than we hold other people to, perversely, or worse, you do think of yourself as being superior to others, and therefore you don't consider that actually you writing in a very technical or academic or inaccessible way is actually, well, it's a bit, and pardon the phrase, it is a bit masturbatory. It is a bit like, oh, I'm just so wonderful, look at me, aren't I fantastic? That's a great shame, because we are missing out hugely on the human interaction you look to be making. And I think that we find this a lot in spheres like biosciences, potentially, cybersecurity, academia, anything that involves a level of real technical skill. Now, I'm not saying that technical detail is not important, because it is fundamentally. But if your sense of worth has to rely on other people thinking you're really clever because you've used all these big words, we've missed the point somewhere along the way. But the great news is that you can fix it. It's a really easy fix to do, but I think we need to stop glorifying academic language as being the be all and end all of human communication and interaction, because it's just not true. How many lectures have we fallen asleep in because someone was too impenetrable, or I don't want to say dense, but if the reading style was too dense? The lectures that we remember are the ones where people spoke to us as human beings, where there was an interaction there, or there was a passion, there was an energy, there was something there that sort of grabbed you and woke you up. And I'm sorry, but 12 pages of a JSTOR journal is not going to do it for you, And there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's a way of continuing that academic conversation, building on the remarkable research of all the academics that have gone before. You continue that conversation, but it doesn't have to be by writing at such a level that people can't access it. And I think that's when academia does deserve, dare I say, its ivory tower perception and its, elitism, shall we say.
But we need people like, I'm just thinking of Professor Brian Cox or David Attenborough, or I don't know, for some reason these people just jumped into my mind, who really have this ability to translate the academic language and get these crucially important points across to the masses. And I mean, we are talking about, language services here, but they are, fighting global issues. And if it remains in the realm of academia, then yeah, we are lost.
Yeah, we are. Well put. And I think that what I think about, the things that come to mind when we think Brian Cox or David Attenborough is they are tangible in terms of their language. So their language becomes something that we are able to identify in ourselves as well. And when I say tangible, what I mean is that, it's when you truly understand something, you don't have to shroud it in language to make it seem like you understand it. If you can explain something, and that's always the hallmark, isn't it, of truly understanding something, is when you can teach it to another person. Because if you've genuinely grasped the concept, you should be able to put it across there with confidence and in a way that someone else can absorb. And I think that is the hallmark of having truly absorbed and grasped an idea. And if we can do that with our language, especially with our customers, is saying, look, I genuinely have grasped what your issue is because I'm passing it back to you in language that's tangible and understandable and resonates with you. Oh, I now feel like you can actually solve my problem because you do understand what's going on. And I think all of us ultimately do just want to feel seen and heard and understood and valued, really, on the back of that.
It's a very interesting point that you said about teaching. And I feel that there is so much in common between teaching and marketing. I mean, marketing is ultimately in some shape or form educating our people, our target audience, or what do you think?
No, I think that's a really good way to put it. And actually, I like it very much because it now we can think about marketing as an ongoing process, which it is ultimately. You know, marketing is not always a one and done. And I think that we often are very guilty of doing that. Oh, I'm just going to focus on the CPA, on the cost per acquisition. I'm just going to get people, I'm going to buy them. First of all, gross, because it's dehumanizing. But secondly, if we think about it from an education perspective, we are going to stop looking for instant gratification when it comes to marketing results. Now, that's not to say that you don't need those results. Of course you do. But what you actually want to look at instead is the more gradual, granular process of respecting that a human being is going to need to go on a journey before it reaches the conclusion you want them to reach. The same is true of teaching, you know. And when we think about that as well, we get to think about individual learning styles, individual customer styles. What do they need? What else can we do for you? How can we help you? It takes all of the focus off you as a person or as a teacher or as a marketer and puts it where it should be, which is on your customer or your student.
I'm getting goosebumps here. I really love it. And the other thing, the final thing that I wanted to mention in relation to teaching is, you know, how many times I've experienced this thing when I'm teaching something for the first time, or I'm trying to teach it for the first time, and I'm finally understanding it. Right? So by teaching, I'm understanding the whole concept in a very, very different way. And my own knowledge ultimately reaches another, a higher sense. And how that relates to what you also just said about teaching and marketing.
Definitely. And I think the teaching metaphor, actually, it's not one I, you know, myself have necessarily thought too much in depth about, but I think it is one of those, the more I think about it, the more true it you know, rings for me. And I think your part there about, you know, it's funny how as marketers as well, I think we are in a constant process of learning. And by allowing ourselves to feel like we are students just as much as our customers are students of our product, you know, I think this is one of those things where I've always been a fan of curiosity over perfection as a recovering perfectionist. That's definitely been a really helpful antidote, is actually curiosity over and above perfectionism, because perfectionism is static. Once something becomes perfect, it can't change, because if it was to change, it wouldn't be perfect anymore. So thinking about curiosity, it doesn't end with the problem. It then asks, and then what happened? So what next? And I think that's a much more exciting place to play as a teacher and as a marketer. You know, you're never going to be finished learning a language, Gabriella, are you? There's nuance, and there are idioms, and there's slang, and there's alteration. That's what's so thrilling about language as an entity, about linguistics as a field. And I'm getting excited because the hands have come up. But you can tell that it's such an exciting field because language, like humanity, is always shifting and evolving, hopefully for the better. But it is, you know, it's never static, and that means there's always something new to learn. And to a nerd like me, I mean, it's heaven, basically.
Let's talk briefly about the words our customers use consciously, and the words that they use subconsciously. You have this very interesting idea around this and how that should be translated in marketing and how we should pay attention to this. So conscious language and subconscious words used by our potential customers.
So this is a really fun one. And this is where I know everyone hates a focus group, but secretly really love a focus group. I know that's not cool, but yeah. The difference between conscious and subconscious language is consciousness is whatever we've given ourselves permission to think about. And it's interesting because consciousness is absorbed, and not in a kind of social constructivism way, but our consciousness is all the things we've kind of rationalized, we've made logical in our brain. The conscious thoughts that we have are filtered, for want of a better word. The subconscious is obviously all the murky, soupy, primordial swamp of thought that goes on underneath the surface. One of the things that I tend to do if I'm presenting or if I'm doing a workshop is a speed writing exercise. Now, I did unfortunately traumatize most of the attendees of our talk a couple of months ago, Gabriella, with a speed writing exercise. And beyond the hand cramp, what it does is it opens the trapdoor, if you like, between your subconscious and your conscious mind let you blurt out stuff that you may not have wanted to admit to beforehand. It's not always negative. Sometimes it can be really surprising. I personally tend to do this more with my clients than with their customers, because what I find helpful is starting with a lot of the narratives and biases that we have to begin with in our language as a service provider or as a business. And this often helps them to really understand why some of their marketing isn't working right now. Because, for example, they have a website, and on their website, 28% of the words, if I do a linguistic audit, 28% of the words on that website actually indicate things like, it's affordable, it's inexpensive, it's mass produced, it's cheap, it's accessible. But they really want to be a luxury brand. They want to be something that people aspire to. They want to have that real sense of being a premium product. And what that tells me when I pass that back to them in the consultation sessions that we'll have is that you've got one thing going on your website in terms of the copy, which means that there's probably a subconscious motive creeping out in your language, whether you realize it or not. And I think our customers are the same. So when you have someone who's called up and they're frustrated, and you've taken the customer service call in a call center, and if so, God love you, because that is one of the hardest jobs in the whole world, is being nice to people when they call you up just to berate you on the phone. And what you can often hear is that sometimes when people are mad with you on the phone, or you're taking a customer service call, it's not about the product that's broken down. They sometimes just want to feel that you are listening to them and you're listening to the problems that they're having. And in that sense, it's less the kind of subconscious words that we don't use and more the subconscious feeling. And often, you have an opportunity, and I suppose this is a user experience thing, but you have an opportunity with every single negative call that comes in to turn someone into a lifelong fan or a lifelong loyal customer, just by being human about it. And that again involves taking yourself out of the picture. So the conscious thing works on sort of different levels. With my clients, it'll be one thing, and I'll say, hey, this is what you've told me. Is that true? And then actually, this is what else you've said, and this seems to be more appropriate. So what can we do to help you change that idea you have about yourself? And then when your customers call up with the kind of conscious, subconscious, a lot of it is actually just, again, about being empathized with. And that can be tricky because someone screaming down the phone at you is not necessarily someone that you want to empathize with. But if you're doing it from a business purpose, the question should always be what, and genuinely meant, not in like what can I do to make this right? But I'm so you would be astonished at how far a genuine apology will go. Think about any time that you've called up about your Virgin mobile media account or whatever it is, your Wi-Fi's collapsed or you just can't, the connection's rubbish. And rather than have someone tell you, oh, sorry, it's not my department, I'll just pass you over. Something like, oh, I am so sorry that must be so frustrating for you. Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you for calling. What we're going to do is we're going to put this right and, give me all the details, and I'm going to take a note of these, and what I'm going to do is this, this, and this, and just making someone feel that you want to help them. Again, this shouldn't be the rarity, but it is. And I think that when it gets to that sense of understanding that when someone's screaming at you, it's not you they're screaming at. There's probably something else that's going on in the background, and you unfortunately happen to be in the firing line.
That's so true. And then bringing this back to who I think I will need some time to digest it all, because all you are saying, I'm hanging on to your every single word, basically. But to bring this back to this, the idea about the subconscious and conscious language. So what's the idea here? So the subconscious language that our customers are using, why do we need to be aware of that?
Because the subconscious is what's going on whether you like it or not. So I think subconsciously, or the subconscious is what drives a lot of the conscious language. So if you feel, as an academic, superior to other people, or if you use jargon in a business context to make yourself seem like you know more than you're talking about, that's probably coming from a place of inferiority. If you didn't feel inferior subconsciously, you wouldn't have to put people down through your language, or you wouldn't have to distance them from you by using language that isn't accessible. So us being aware of our customers doing that, and again, it always depends on the business context, always depends on the situation that you find yourself in. But if you, for example, I'm just trying to think of an example as a language teacher, which I'm not, but I would often find that my students were more interested in learning lyrics in English because it felt more cool to learn an Eminem and Rihanna song than it did to talk about, and I understand this completely, conjugation in English. That's not fun at all. But by finding something that subconsciously didn't feel like work to them, we were able to get something valuable out of that lesson. So the subconscious words that we use, it's not actually words in the subconscious, I would argue. It's more about the feeling and then how that manifests consciously. So it's almost like we're actually tracing the conscious word to find the root cause of the feeling in the subconscious, if that makes sense.
Got it. Perfect. Perfect. Many thanks for the clarification. Now, here is another thing, another idea of yours that I picked up on in that podcast. So you say, don't market on assumption. What do you mean by that?
Oh, well, think about it, right? Marketing on assumption, right? So I am a 30-year-old white woman with long hair, and, you know, I like to do some makeup on my face, assuming therefore that I will want to, because I've hit 30, a chemical peel and also LVL lash. Now, again, nothing wrong with any of these things, but marketing to me, based on the assumptions I present, would be like saying, oh, obviously you like pumpkin spice latte because basic, and me going, no, I can't think of anything worse that I would know. So it's that marketing on assumption makes people feel like they are commodities. That's really what it is at the core of it. And marketing's people, when you've assumed certain things about them, rather than doing your research, because yes, it's going to take more time, but you're going to get such better results. Don't go for the short-term win, go for the long-term upward trend. But making people feel like a commodity, assuming anything about anybody, is a really dangerous game to play, because ultimately it says, I know you better than you know yourself. And is there anything more arrogant than that, Gabriella? I really don't think so. It robs people of their individualism. It makes people into monoliths. And it stops you from actually looking after them the way that they should be and deserve you, because we're all sovereign human beings. So, sorry, that was a proper rant about not making assumptions, because assumptions degrade people. And yes, we all make them because it's a convenient way of figuring out information. It's a natural response in your brain to say, oh, I've got this. I'm extrapolating from all the data I've got in this like 0.5 seconds that I've met you. I'm just going to jump to some conclusions. That may or may not save your life. It's like looking at the lion in the, you know, if you're on safari and thinking, oh, his teeth are showing, he's probably not smiling, I should really get back in the vehicle now. You know, those are assumptions that are going to save your life. I get it. But at the same time, when it comes to marketing, you're not about to be eaten by a lion. So you can afford to do the groundwork to find out what your customers, individuals, are actually looking for.
And that's where coming back to this idea of yours about the active listening comes into the picture.
Yes.
Whew, okay. A few seconds until this lands. Again, I think we need time to digest, like brilliant. What would you say is the most critical skill in marketing that has made a difference in your own marketing business, Olim?
I mean, you just said active listening, but that is ultimately what it is.
Wow.
Active listening is one of the most underrated and one of the most powerful things you can do for your business. My business, the conclusions that I draw for my clients are from two things. And not the lesser of these two things, but possibly the slightly less significant of these two things is being a mirror, is being able to hold what people have told me and put it back to them and say, this is what you've just told me. Is that correct? And holding enough space to make people feel comfortable say, oh, no, actually, that's not quite right. Oh, it's interesting that I said that. Oh, that's not something that I thought about consciously. But I can only do that because I listen as hard as my little ears will allow me. And I take lots of notes. And I think that the other thing is also that removing yourself from the picture, it can be so difficult to do because naturally we're human beings. We all just want to think about ourselves. It's fine. But removing yourself from the picture as much as possible by putting all your focus on the other person, what it is that they have to say, is singularly, it will give you so much insight and information that you're not going to get anywhere else. You know, you could, yeah, sure, you can survey your customers and that's fantastic. Why don't you just pick up the phone and talk to them? And yes, I know that comes with its own barriers. Or if you're working with clients or you're working with fellow teachers, or you want to know the answer to something, can we just start asking and then actually listening to the answer? I think that's one of those mad situations where people are like, how did I joke that my business is built on sliding into people's DMs and LinkedIn. Now, I don't normally advocate for that kind of behavior, but it came from a genuine curiosity about other people's businesses when I set up Olim as a freelancer. all I wanted to do was learn from people, because I knew nothing. So what I wanted to do was talk to other people and say, look, what you do is really interesting. I've got no idea how industrial engineering and business mechanics works. Can you tell me about that? And we would have a wonderful conversation. People can tell, I think, when you're genuinely interested in them. And that was a game changer, because for people who, and we've all had it on LinkedIn, being like, hi, here are my products. Do you want to schedule your call? And like, first of all, gross, stop doing that. But second of all, I know that you're thinking of me as a commodity. Active listening makes people feel like the worthy and sovereign entities that they are, and that they should be respected as. And I think as marketers, what a gift to be able to give someone, or as a teacher, what a gift to be able to give a student, to say, hey, I see you and I see the work that you're doing and I love it and I think it's wonderful, and we're just going to keep encouraging you to do more of that same thing. If marketing and teaching a language and it's all about relationships, and the best relationships are the ones where we feel good, that needs to be the end goal at the end of the day.
Thank you so much for what you do. I mean, seriously, we need these messages. We need to keep hearing this. And you've already given us plenty of advice. But if you could just give us language professionals specifically, just one final piece of marketing advice, what do you think it would be? Start.
And I think that's one for all the teachers out there who first of all, it's hard. Like it's hard work being a teacher, and I think people don't rate the work that goes into lesson planning. They see you as the person that they hang out with for an hour a week whilst they practice a language, and I don't think they see all the work that goes on, the lesson planning, the thinking about things that are exciting and interesting for them to talk about, holding that space in that conversation, showing up when you're absolutely exhausted because you made a commitment. But if you're wanting to market yourself as a language teacher, you have to start marketing yourself as a language teacher. And on the back of that, don't be afraid to make mistakes. That we often only learn, I certainly have only learned through trial and error. And a lot of people are like, oh, fail fast. You're like, that's helpful advice, but what if I don't know where to start failing? How can I fail at failing? You would be surprised, but we will manage. But you will only get to be good at marketing yourself and understanding what your customers want when you begin doing it. So you can do the active listening thing, but you have to start marketing and talking to customers to be able to actively listen to them. So what you have really, and this is hopefully the kind of closing piece here in my ramble, is that what you have and what you offer is genuinely so valuable. People need to hear about what it is that you do. They're not going to hear about it unless you tell them. So figure out some different ways to start trying to tell people what you do. Ask your current customers why it is that they love learning from you. Take those messages to market. But unless you start doing the thing, you're just going to have more of the same guilt of not actually doing it. And I think that from personal experience, the frustration of sitting there doing nothing, waiting for something wonderful to happen, versus the mild discomfort of just a little bit putting yourself out there. And also, you haven't got to reinvent the wheel. Find another language teacher that does stuff that you love and emulate that in your own way. There's a great book, now I can't remember his name off the top of my head. There's a fantastic book called Steal Like an Artist. And is it Austin Kleon is his name? It's something about, I'll message you, Gabby, for the show notes. But yeah, Steal Like an Artist. Apply that to your marketing as a language teacher. Just do one tiny thing a day. By the end of the week, you will have done 5 tiny things. That's amazing. Just do the same thing again next week. Easy. You can do it. I believe in you.
The second time I'm saying amen today. I'm very conscious about that, but seriously, thank you so much for joining me, Eloise, and for sharing all these valuable insights. We will make sure to include all these links that you mentioned in the podcast notes, and also your links, so people can check them out and follow your work. And I really hope that this conversation was useful. Again, my name is Gabriella Ferenczi, and if you want to get more bite-sized, easy to digest episodes on practical modern online marketing, then make sure to subscribe to this podcast. And for more resources, you might want to visit gabriellaferenzi.com/thrive online, which is where I share even more. So all these links will be shared in the podcast notes. Eloise, thank you so much again for your time and for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Gabriella. It's been amazing.
And to our listeners, thank you very much for tuning in. And for those of you who are following the channel on YouTube, many, many thanks for watching. And I will hopefully see you next time. Take care and goodbye now.